He controlled the entire eastern seaboard. Judges, politicians, and police captains were all on his payroll. Luciano Moretti was a man who never asked for permission and never hesitated to pull the trigger. But the one thing he feared wasn't a bullet. It was betrayal. When he decided to surprise his wife by coming home 4 hours early from a business trip, he expected a warm embrace. Instead, he found his timid, invisible maid standing in the foyer, blocking his path with terror in her eyes. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She just pressed a trembling finger to her lips and whispered 2 words that would change the underworld forever. Stay silent. What happened next wasn't just a twist. It was a war. The rain in Chicago didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. It was a torrential downpour, the kind that rattled against the bulletproof glass of the customized Mercedes-Maybach S-Class as it tore down Lakeshore Drive. Inside, the cabin was silent, insulated from the chaos of the city. Luciano Moretti adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke Brioni suit. He was 38 years old, with eyes the color of cold steel and a reputation that made grown men weep. As the don of the Moretti crime family, he carried the weight of an empire on his shoulders. He had just spent 3 days in New York negotiating a truce with the Russian syndicate, a meeting that had been scheduled to last 5 days. But Luciano was efficient. He had crushed the negotiations, secured the shipping routes, and left the Russians scrambling to sign the deal. He looked at the velvet box sitting on the leather seat next to him. Inside was a diamond and sapphire necklace from Cartier, worth more than most people earned in a lifetime. It was for Sophia. Sophia. Just thinking of her softened the hard lines of his face. She was his sanctuary. In a world of blood and betrayal, she was the only innocent thing he possessed. She didn't ask about the business. She didn't look at the scars on his knuckles. She just loved him. "We're 10 minutes out, boss," the driver, a massive man named Dante, said, his eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. "Good," Luciano replied, his voice a low rumble. "Kill the headlights before we hit the driveway. I don't want to wake the house." He wanted to surprise her. It was their 5th anniversary next week, but he couldn't wait. He wanted to see her face light up when he walked through the door. He wanted to drink a glass of the 82 Margaux he had been saving and forget that he was a monster for just one night. The car turned off the main road and wound its way up the long, tree-lined driveway of the Moretti estate in Highland Park. The mansion was a fortress disguised as a palace. Stone walls, iron gates, and security cameras that covered every inch of the perimeter. Dante killed the lights as instructed. The car glided to a stop like a phantom. "Keep the engine running, Dante," Luciano said, opening the door. "But stay in the car. You sure, boss? You want me to sweep the perimeter? It's my house, Dante. If I can't walk into my own home without a security detail, I'm already dead." Luciano stepped out into the rain. The cold air hit him, waking up his senses. He moved with the predatory grace of a panther, his Italian leather shoes making no sound on the wet pavement. He bypassed the front door, knowing the heavy oak would creak. Instead, he moved to the side entrance, the one the staff used. He had the key. He slid the key into the lock, turned it, and pushed the door open. Silence. The house was massive, a sprawling expanse of marble floors and high ceilings. But usually at 8 p.m. there was life. The faint sound of jazz music, the smell of dinner being prepared, the click of Sophia's heels. Tonight there was nothing. Just a heavy, oppressive silence that felt almost physical. Luciano frowned. His hand instinctively went to the waistband of his trousers, his fingers brushing the cold grip of his custom Glock 19. Paranoia was a survival trait in his line of work. Had the alarm been bypassed? Was someone here? He stepped into the mudroom and moved toward the kitchen. The lights were dimmed, casting long, skeletal shadows across the stainless steel appliances. That's when he saw her. Elena Vance, the maid. She was young, maybe 24, with mousy brown hair and a demeanor so quiet Luciano often forgot she existed. She had been with them for 6 months, scrubbing floors and dusting the library, always keeping her head down. She was standing in the doorway between the kitchen and the main hallway. She was holding a silver serving tray, but her hands were shaking so violently the silverware rattled against the metal. When she saw Luciano emerge from the shadows, her eyes went wide. She looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. Luciano opened his mouth to speak, to ask where Sophia was, but Elena moved. She didn't run away. She ran toward him. She closed the distance in 3 strides, dropping the tray. It clattered onto the rug, muffled but still audible. Panic flared in her eyes. She reached out, her small hands grabbing the lapels of his $3,000 suit, and she shoved him back into the shadows of the kitchen alcove. Luciano was stunned. No one touched him. No one. His instinct was to snap her wrist, to throw her against the wall. His hand tightened on his gun. "What the hell are you?" he started, his voice a dangerous growl. Elena pressed a finger to his lips. Her skin was ice cold. "Shh," she hissed, tears welling in her eyes. "Please, Mr. Moretti. Not a sound." Luciano stared at her. He saw genuine terror in her face. Not fear of him, but fear for him. That realization froze his anger. "Where is my wife?" Luciano whispered, his voice barely audible, lethal in its intensity. Elena swallowed hard. She pointed toward the great hall, the massive living area at the center of the house. "She's in there," Elena whispered. "With him." "Him?" Luciano's blood ran cold. The thought of another man in his house, with his wife, sent a spike of jealous rage through his chest that was sharper than any knife. "Who?" Elena shook her head frantically. "The one you call brother." Luciano stopped breathing. "Marcus. Marcus Valerius. His underboss. His best friend since they were kids, stealing hubcaps in Little Italy. The man he trusted with his life, his money, and his family. Marcus was supposed to be in Miami overseeing a shipment. "You're lying," Luciano said, his voice flat. "Listen," Elena pleaded, gripping his arm. "Just listen." Luciano pushed her hand away gently but firmly. He drew his Glock, the motion smooth and practiced. He thumbed the safety off. He moved past Elena, stepping onto the plush Persian runner in the hallway. He moved like a ghost, hugging the wall, inching closer to the double doors of the great hall, which were cracked slightly open. He expected to hear the sounds of passion. He prepared himself to kick the door down and put 2 bullets in Marcus's chest and 1 in Sophia's. He prepared for his heart to break. But as he got closer, he didn't hear the sounds of love. He heard the sound of weeping. Luciano froze. He was 3 feet from the door. "Please, Marcus, don't make me do this." Sophia's voice drifted through the crack. It was broken, terrified. "He loves you. He trusts you." Luciano felt the world tilt on its axis. He pressed his back against the wall, straining to hear. "Love?" Marcus's voice answered. It was smooth, charming, the voice Luciano had heard across dinner tables for 20 years. But now it lacked the warmth. It was cold, dripping with venom. "Luciano doesn't know how to love, Sophia. He owns, he possesses. You're just another piece of his collection, like that ugly painting in the study or his precious cars." "That's not true," Sophia sobbed. "He's a good man." "He's a dinosaur," Marcus scoffed. The sound of glass clinking against a table followed. He was pouring himself a drink, in Luciano's house, drinking Luciano's liquor while threatening Luciano's wife. The commission is tired of him, Sophia. He's too cautious. He passed on the fentanyl deal. He passed on the human trafficking routes out of Eastern Europe. He's leaving millions on the table because he has principles. Luciano's jaw tightened so hard his teeth ached. He had indeed passed on those deals. He had drawn a line. We sell vices, he had said, not death and slavery. Marcus had argued with him then, but he had smiled and said, "You're the boss, Luciano. Your word is law. Lies, all of it." "I won't help you kill him," Sophia said, her voice gaining a sudden, desperate strength. "I won't poison him. I won't give you the codes to the safe room. I don't care what you do to me." Luciano's heart swelled. She was loyal. Even in the face of this monster, she was loyal. "Oh, sweet Sophia," Marcus laughed. It was a dark, hollow sound. "I knew you'd say that. That's why I didn't come alone." Luciano frowned. "Didn't come alone? Bring him in," Marcus commanded. There was a heavy thud, the sound of a door opening, and then a muffled struggle. "Daddy!" A small, terrified voice cried out. Luciano nearly dropped his gun. That wasn't his child. He and Sophia didn't have children yet. "No!" Sophia screamed. "Leave him alone. He's just a boy. Leave my nephew alone." Luciano pieced it together instantly. Sophia's sister lived in Wisconsin. She had a 6-year-old son, Leo. Luciano had met the kid once. He was a bright, happy boy. Marcus had kidnapped him. He had kidnapped a child to leverage Sophia. "It's simple, really," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a sinister whisper. "Luciano comes home on Friday. You slip the digital drive I gave you into his laptop while he sleeps. It installs a tracker and a backdoor keylogger. It gives me his offshore accounts and the location of the safe houses. Once I have that, the commission sanctions the hit. Luciano dies. I take the throne, and little Leo here goes back to his mommy in Wisconsin. Refuse. And well, accidents happen so easily to children." Luciano felt a rage so pure, so white-hot, that his vision blurred. He wanted to storm in there and tear Marcus apart with his bare hands. To hell with the gun. He wanted to feel bones snap. He took a step forward, his boot creaking slightly on the floorboard. Inside the room, the silence was instant. "What was that?" Marcus snapped. Luciano froze. He raised the gun. If Marcus came to the door, he would end it now. But suddenly, a hand clamped over his wrist. He looked down. It was Elena again. She had followed him. She was crouched low, her eyes pleading. She shook her head violently. She pulled a notepad from her apron pocket and scribbled something furiously with a small pencil, then held it up to him in the dim light. "There are 3 men. Heavy arms, kitchen hallway, plus balcony." Luciano stared at the note. He had been so focused on Marcus, he hadn't checked the other tactical points. If he burst in now, he might get Marcus, but the gunman on the balcony would spray the room. Sophia would be caught in the crossfire. Leo would be dead. He looked at Elena. How did she know this? A maid noticed dust, not tactical positioning of hitmen. She flipped the page of her notepad and wrote again. "I can help. I know the house. Trust me." Luciano looked at the door, then back at the maid. He had a choice. Burst in like the raging bull Marcus thought he was, and risk getting his wife killed, or listen to the invisible woman who had just saved his life. Inside the room, Marcus spoke again. Probably just the house settling, or maybe that useless maid dropping something again. If she wasn't so good at cleaning up blood, I'd have fired her weeks ago. Luciano looked at Elena. Her expression hardened. It wasn't the look of a maid anymore. It was the look of a soldier. Luciano nodded once. He holstered his gun, grabbed Elena's arm, and pulled her back toward the shadows of the servants' quarters. You have 2 minutes to explain who you really are, Luciano whispered when they were safe in the pantry, the smell of dried herbs and flour surrounding them. And then tell me how we're going to kill them all without waking the neighbors. Elena took a deep breath. She reached up and pulled the pins from her hair, letting it fall loose. She took off her glasses, revealing eyes that were sharp and intelligent. "My name isn't Elena Vance," she said, her voice losing the trembling, timid pitch she used as a maid. "My name is Special Agent Sarah Walker, FBI. I've been undercover in your house for 6 months, building a RICO case against you." Luciano stiffened, his hand twitching back toward his weapon. "But," she continued quickly, holding up a hand, "Marcus Valerius killed my partner 3 years ago. The Bureau wants you in handcuffs, Luciano. But I want Marcus in the ground. And tonight I'm off the clock." Luciano stared at her. The twists kept coming. His maid was a Fed. His best friend was a traitor. His wife was a hostage. A slow, terrifying smile spread across Luciano's face. It was the smile of the devil recognizing a fellow sinner. "All right, Agent Walker," Luciano said, rolling up his sleeves. "You want justice? I want revenge. Let's show Marcus why you don't threaten the king in his own castle." The pantry was small, lined with shelves of imported pasta, jars of truffles, and vintage wines. It was a space designed for culinary indulgence, not war councils. Yet, here they were, the most powerful crime lord in Chicago and a federal agent, huddled together under the hum of the refrigerator. Luciano holstered his Glock but kept his hand resting near it. "So," he whispered, his eyes scanning the gap under the door for movement. "You've been watching me for 6 months. You know my schedule, my habits, my contacts. And you didn't arrest me." "I told you," Sarah said, stripping off her maid's apron and tossing it onto a sack of flour. "The Bureau wants the whole network. They want the politicians, the judges, the overseas accounts. You are just the key. But Marcus is a rabid dog. If he takes over, the streets will run red. He doesn't have your restraint." Luciano snorted softly. "Restraint? Is that what they call it at Quantico?" "I've seen you stop shipments because they contained children," Sarah replied, her gaze steady. "I've seen you mediate gang wars that would have killed bystanders. You're a criminal, Moretti, don't get me wrong. But you have a code. Marcus has nothing." Luciano looked at her. Really looked at her. For months, she had been a blur in his peripheral vision. A grey uniform, a quiet, "Yes, sir, no, sir." Now he saw the tension in her jaw, the calluses on her hands that weren't from scrubbing floors, but from hours at the firing range. "3 men, Luciano said, shifting into tactical mode. "Plus Marcus. That makes 4 hostiles. My security detail is likely dead or bought off." "Dead?" Sarah confirmed grimly. "I found Jenkins and Ross in the garage an hour ago. Silenced pistols. They didn't even have time to draw." A flash of pain crossed Luciano's eyes. Jenkins had a newborn daughter, another debt Marcus would pay for in blood. "The 3 gunmen," Sarah continued, using a bag of coffee beans to prop up a rough sketch she was drawing on her notepad. "One is patrolling the upstairs landing, covering the balcony overlook. He has a scoped rifle. If we enter the great hall, he has the high ground. He'll pick us off before we take 2 steps. The second? Kitchen hallway. He's the rover. He's moving between the dining room and the mudroom. Heavy build, bald, carrying a submachine gun. A UMP-45, I think. And the third? Guarding the front door, but he's distracted. He keeps checking his phone." Luciano nodded. "We take the rover first. If he checks in and gets no response, the others will be alerted." "We can't use guns," Sarah warned. The great hall has vaulted ceilings. The acoustics are terrible. One shot and Marcus hears it. If he hears it, he puts a bullet in Sophia or the boy." "Blades and hands, then," Luciano said, reaching into his boot and pulling out a combat knife. The blade was matte black, serrated on one side. "I hope you know how to fight, Agent Walker. I'm not in the habit of babysitting." Sarah reached under the bottom shelf of the pantry. She pulled away a loose kickboard that Luciano hadn't even known was loose. From the dark recess, she withdrew a slender, lethal-looking karambit knife and a small canister of pepper gel. "I was top of my class in CQC, close quarters combat," she whispered, spinning the karambit around her index finger with terrifying speed. "And I know exactly which floorboards in this house creak because I'm the one who waxes them. Follow my steps exactly. If I step over a spot, you step over it. Do not deviate." Luciano felt a grudging respect rise in his chest. "After this is over, Sarah, if we survive, you and I are going to have a very long conversation about my privacy." "If we survive," she retorted, moving to the door, "I'll let you buy me a very expensive drink. Now move. The rover is due to pass the kitchen door in 30 seconds. They moved out of the pantry, the air thick with tension. The house, usually a symbol of Luciano's power, had transformed into a labyrinth of danger. Every shadow could hold a killer. Every sound could be a death sentence for his wife. They crouched behind the massive granite island in the kitchen. The rain lashed against the windows, masking the sound of their breathing. Thump, thump, thump. Heavy boots on the hardwood. The rover was coming. Luciano tightened his grip on his knife. He watched Sarah. She was perfectly still, her breathing rhythmic. She held up 3 fingers. 2. 1. A large man, built like a vending machine and smelling of stale tobacco, walked past the kitchen archway. He had the UMP-45 slung over his shoulder, looking bored. Sarah moved. She didn't lunge. She flowed. She stepped out from the island, silent as smoke. She picked up a heavy crystal vase from the counter, one Sophia loved, and in one fluid motion, she didn't throw it, she placed it on the edge of the counter and tipped it. It teetered. The guard heard the faint scrape of crystal on stone. He turned, his hand going to his gun. "Hello?" he grunted. That split second of distraction was all Luciano needed. He exploded from the shadows, closing the distance instantly. He clamped his left hand over the man's mouth, stifling the shout, and drove his knee into the man's lower back. The guard arched backward, struggling. Luciano raised the knife, aiming for the jugular. "No blood!" Sarah hissed, grabbing Luciano's wrist mid-strike. "The smell! Marcus might smell it if the airflow shifts. Choke him out!" Luciano adjusted instantly. He holstered the knife and wrapped his massive forearm around the guard's throat. A sleeper hold. The guard thrashed, his boots scuffing the floor, but Luciano was immovable. He squeezed, cutting off the blood flow to the brain. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. The guard went limp, a dead weight in Luciano's arms. Luciano lowered him gently to the floor. He checked the pulse. Faint, but there. "Tie him up," Luciano ordered quietly. "Use the zip ties from under the sink." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "You know where the zip ties are?" "I live here," Luciano muttered. "And I like an organized kitchen." They bound the guard quickly and dragged him into the pantry, gagging him with a dish towel. 1 down. 2 to go. "The next one is the problem," Sarah whispered, wiping sweat from her forehead. "The sniper on the balcony. To get to him, we have to go up the main staircase. It's exposed. If Marcus looks out of the great hall doors, he'll see us." Luciano shook his head. "No. There's a service elevator behind the library." It comes out in the linen closet on the second floor. Sarah stared at him. The service elevator hasn't worked since I started working here. The panel is dead. Luciano allowed a small, grim smile to touch his lips. It works. I disabled the call button so the staff wouldn't use it to slack off. It requires a code. You really are a control freak, Sarah murmured. Let's go. The library was dark, smelling of old paper and mahogany. The rain drummed relentlessly against the tall windows, casting flickering shadows across the rows of books. Luciano moved to a false bookshelf filled with encyclopedias. He pulled a specific volume, The History of the Roman Empire, and a keypad revealed itself. He punched in a 6-digit code, Sophia's birthday. The panel slid open, revealing a small, cramped elevator car. Ladies first, Luciano gestured. Sarah stepped in, pressing herself against the back wall. Luciano squeezed in next to her. It was intimate, too intimate for two people who were technically enemies. He could smell her shampoo, lavender and vanilla. It was a domestic scent that clashed violently with the weapon in her hand. When we get upstairs, Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the elevator. The linen closet opens directly across from the balcony overlook. The sniper will be facing away from us, looking down at the great hall. But the floor there is creaky. It's old oak. I know, Luciano said. I'll take the lead. I'm heavier, but I know the joists. Luciano, Sarah said, looking up at him. If this goes south, if we have to choose between saving Sophia and catching Marcus. There is no choice, Luciano cut her off, his eyes cold as glaciers. Sophia lives. If Marcus gets away, I will hunt him down to the ends of the earth. But Sophia lives. Understood? Sarah nodded. Understood. The elevator jolted to a stop. Luciano cracked the door open. The hallway was dimly lit by sconces. Directly ahead, about 20 feet away, was the balcony. It was a mezzanine level that looked down into the great hall. Leaning against the railing, silhouetted against the light coming from below, was the sniper. He was relaxed, arrogant. He held a suppressed AR-15, the barrel resting on the expensive mahogany railing. He was chewing gum. Luciano stepped out. He moved slowly, testing every inch of the floor before transferring his weight. Sarah followed in his footsteps, a shadow of a shadow. They were 10 feet away. From below, Marcus's voice drifted up, loud and angry. I'm losing patience, Sophia. Give me the password for the laptop. I know Luciano uses a secondary encryption key. I don't know it, Sophia screamed. The sound of a slap echoed through the house, sharp, brutal. Luciano froze. Every muscle in his body seized. The beast inside him roared, demanding release. He wanted to jump over the railing and rain death upon them. The sniper on the balcony chuckled. He shifted his weight, turning slightly to look down at the violence, enjoying the show. He's distracted, Sarah signaled with a hand motion. Luciano forced himself to breathe. Patience. He crept forward. 5 feet. 3 feet. The sniper stiffened. Maybe he felt the air pressure change. Maybe he smelled the testosterone and rage radiating off Luciano. He started to turn, the rifle barrel swinging around. Luciano didn't hesitate. He lunged. He didn't use the knife this time. He used his hands. He grabbed the sniper's head with both hands, one on the chin, one on the back of the skull, and twisted violently. Crack! The sound was sickeningly loud in the quiet hallway. The sniper dropped like a stone. Luciano caught him before he hit the floor, easing the body down. Sarah winced. That was loud. We didn't have a choice, Luciano whispered, his chest heaving. He was turning. Below them, the shouting stopped. What was that? Marcus's voice rang out. Vinny, that you? Luciano and Sarah pressed themselves flat against the floor of the balcony, hidden by the solid wood railing. Vinny! Marcus shouted again. "Report!" Silence. "Damn it!" Marcus hissed. "Go check the fuse box. Vinny probably tripped over his own feet, or the storm knocked something loose." Luciano peeked through the balusters of the railing. He had a perfect view of the great hall. Sophia was tied to a chair in the center of the room. Her cheek was red and swelling. Beside her, little Leo was gagged, his eyes wide with terror. Marcus stood near the fireplace, holding a crystal tumbler of scotch. He looked agitated. He pulled a phone from his pocket. "They're late," Marcus muttered to himself, but loud enough for Luciano to hear. "Where the hell are the Russians?" Luciano looked at Sarah. "The Russians?" Sarah's eyes widened. She pulled her notepad and wrote, "He's selling you out, not just a takeover. He's handing the territory to the Volkov Syndicate." It was worse than Luciano thought. A takeover was internal politics. Bringing in the Russians was an act of war that would burn Chicago to the ground. If the Volkovs entered the house, there would be no survivors. They didn't leave witnesses. "We have to move," Luciano whispered. "If the Russians arrive, we're dead." "We still have the guy at the front door," Sarah noted. "Forget him. We have the high ground now," Luciano said, eyeing the sniper's rifle lying on the floor. "I can take Marcus from here." He reached for the AR-15. Sarah put a hand on his shoulder. "Wait, look at Sophia." Luciano looked. Sophia wasn't just crying. She was moving her hands behind the chair. She was sawing the rope against the sharp metal decorative edge of the antique chair. She was fighting. "That's my girl," Luciano whispered, pride warring with fear. "If you shoot Marcus," Sarah whispered, "he might have a dead man's switch, or he might just spasm and pull the trigger on the gun he's holding to Leo's head. It's too risky." "So what do we do?" "Distraction," Sarah said. "We need to draw Marcus away from them. Make him come to us." She looked around the hallway. Her eyes landed on a heavy bronze bust of Julius Caesar sitting on a pedestal near the stairs. "Classic," she murmured. She crawled over to the bust. She looked at Luciano and held up 3 fingers. 3, 2, 1. She shoved the bust. It tumbled down the massive wooden staircase. Thud, thud, crash, thud. It sounded like a body falling. It landed at the bottom of the stairs with a deafening gong sound as it hit the marble floor. In the great hall, Marcus spun around, aiming his gun at the archway leading to the foyer. "Vinny!" Marcus screamed. "Show yourself!" "Silence. I'm not playing games!" Marcus yelled. He grabbed Leo by the collar of his shirt and dragged the boy toward the hallway, using him as a human shield. "Come out or the kid dies!" Luciano's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it. "I'm going down," Luciano whispered to Sarah. "You stay here with the rifle. If you have a clean shot at Marcus, take it. Do not hit the boy." "Luciano, wait!" But he was already gone. He didn't take the stairs. He vaulted over the balcony railing, a 12-foot drop, landing silently in the shadows behind the grand piano in the corner of the great hall. Luciano hit the floor, absorbing the impact with a roll. The adrenaline in his system was so potent he didn't feel the jar to his ankles. He was now in the room. He was behind the Steinway piano, obscured by the shadows. Marcus was 20 feet away, standing in the archway, his back partially to Luciano, his gun pressed to Leo's temple. Sophia was still tied to the chair, twisting frantically. "Who is in my house?" Marcus screamed, his voice cracking. The smooth, charming traitor was gone. Panic was setting in. Luciano stood up slowly. He adjusted his cuffs. If he was going to reveal himself, he would do it like a king. "Hello, Marcus," Luciano said. His voice was calm, conversational, terrifying. Marcus spun around, dragging Leo with him. His eyes bulged when he saw Luciano. "Luciano!" Marcus gasped. You You're supposed to be in New York. The storm. The flight." "I took the car," Luciano said, stepping out from behind the piano. He held his hands up, showing they were empty. "Let the boy go, Marcus. This is between you and me." "Stay back!" Marcus shrieked, pressing the barrel harder into Leo's skin. The boy whimpered. "I'll kill him! I swear to God, Enzo, I'll paint the walls with him." "You don't believe in God, Marcus," Luciano said, taking a slow step forward. "And you don't have the guts. You're a businessman, remember? A negotiator. Killing a child is bad for business." "The Russians don't care about business," Marcus laughed maniacally. "They're 5 minutes away. When they get here, you're dead anyway. I'm just holding the door open for them." Luciano's eyes flicked briefly to the balcony above. He couldn't see Sarah, but he knew she was there. He had to keep Marcus talking. He had to separate him from the boy. "The Volkovs?" Luciano scoffed. "You sold me out for pennies, Marcus. I would have given you half the kingdom if you had just asked. But you were always jealous, even when we were kids. You wanted Sophia. You wanted the chair. You wanted the respect. But you never earned it." "I earned it every day," Marcus roared, spit flying from his mouth. "I cleaned up your messes. I made the deals. And you played the noble savage. Oh, we don't sell drugs to kids. We don't traffic women. You're weak, Luciano. And tonight, the weak die." "Maybe," Luciano said softly. "But not alone." Luciano reached into his pocket. Marcus flinched. "Don't." Luciano pulled out his phone. He tossed it onto the floor, sliding it toward Marcus. "Check the notifications, brother," Luciano said. "What?" Marcus looked confused. "I said check it. The Russians aren't coming." It was a bluff, a massive, dangerous bluff. Marcus hesitated. Greed and fear warred in his eyes. He glanced down at the phone sliding across the marble. In that split second, 2 things happened. First, Sophia broke free. She had managed to cut the ropes. She didn't run away. She threw herself out of the chair, tackling Marcus's legs with the ferocity of a mother lioness protecting her cub. "Run, Leo!" she screamed. Marcus stumbled, his gun firing wildly into the ceiling. Bang! Bang! Second, a single shot rang out from the balcony. Crack! It wasn't a kill shot. Sarah couldn't risk hitting Sophia or Leo in the tangle of limbs. The bullet struck the hand Marcus was using to hold the gun. "Ah!" Marcus screamed, dropping the weapon. His hand was a ruin of blood. Luciano roared. He charged. Marcus kicked Sophia away, scrambling backward, clutching his mangled hand. He dove for the dropped gun. Luciano got there first. He kicked the gun across the room. It skittered under the sofa. Marcus scrambled to his feet, pulling a knife from his belt with his good hand. He was cornered, bleeding, and desperate. "Come on then," Marcus yelled. Luciano didn't draw his own knife. He raised his fists. He wanted to feel this. "Get Sophia and the boy out of here!" Luciano shouted to the balcony. Sarah appeared at the railing, rifle in hand. "Luciano, we have to go. I see headlights at the gate. The Russians are here." Luciano's blood ran cold. The bluff hadn't been a bluff for long. "Go!" Luciano commanded. "Take the service elevator. Get them to the safe room in the basement." "I'm not leaving you," Sophia cried, pulling Leo into her arms. "Go!" Luciano's voice shook the walls. Sarah didn't argue. She knew tactical reality. She holstered the rifle and vaulted over the railing, parkour style, landing with a roll. She grabbed Sophia and Leo. "Come with me, Mrs. Moretti, now!" Sarah barked, her FBI command voice cutting through Sophia's panic. They ran toward the library. Luciano turned back to Marcus. Marcus was smiling. It was a bloody, broken smile. "You hear that, Enzo?" Marcus wheezed. "Cavalry's here. You can beat me, but you can't beat 20 Spetsnaz soldiers." The front door exploded inward. Wood splinters flew everywhere. Luciano grabbed a heavy iron poker from the fireplace. He looked at the shattered door, then at Marcus. "I don't need to beat them," Luciano said, his eyes burning with a dark fire. "I just need to buy time." He swung the poker, not at Marcus, but at the massive crystal chandelier chain anchored to the wall next to the fireplace. He had loosened it years ago during a renovation and never fixed it properly. He hit the anchor pin with all his strength. The chain snapped. The 2-ton crystal chandelier, a masterpiece of glass and light, plummeted from the ceiling. It crashed directly in front of the foyer archway, creating a massive barrier of shattered glass and twisted metal, blocking the path of the incoming Russians. Luciano grabbed Marcus by the throat with his left hand, lifted him off his feet, and slammed him against the stone mantel. "You brought the wolves to my door, Marcus," Luciano growled, staring into the traitor's terrified eyes. "Now we're going to see who has the sharper teeth." Luciano knocked Marcus unconscious with a single brutal headbutt. He threw the traitor's limp body over his shoulder like a sack of garbage. He wasn't leaving him for the Russians. Marcus had answers, and Luciano Moretti always collected his debts. He ran for the library, the sound of Russian shouting and gunfire erupting behind him as the invaders climbed over the wreckage of the chandelier. The hunt was over. The war had just begun. The library door slammed shut and locked automatically behind them, engaging the magnetic seals just as the first wave of heavy gunfire splintered the oak paneling from the hallway side. "The bookshelf!" Luciano barked, dumping Marcus's unconscious body onto a leather ottoman. Sarah didn't need to be told twice. She grabbed the spine of the history of the Roman Empire again. But this time, she didn't punch in the elevator code. She pressed a hidden biometric scanner disguised as the author's nameplate. Luciano had shown her the layout of the house's schematics in the pantry, but seeing the technology in action was different. The entire bookcase groaned and swung inward, revealing a steel staircase descending into the darkness. "Go!" Luciano commanded, picking Marcus up again. "Sophia, take Leo. Don't look back." They descended into the belly of the earth. The air grew cooler, smelling of concrete and filtered oxygen. This was the bunker. Luciano had built it 3 years ago, not for a nuclear war, but for nights exactly like this. At the bottom of the stairs was a door made of 10-inch reinforced titanium. Luciano scanned his retina. The bolts retracted with a heavy, hydraulic hiss. They spilled inside, and Luciano hit the emergency seal button. The door slammed shut, locking out the world, the noise, and the Russians. For a moment, there was only the sound of their ragged breathing. The room was stark but functional. A wall of monitors showed camera feeds from every room in the house upstairs. Weapons lined one wall: assault rifles, shotguns, tactical vests. A medical station sat in the corner. Sophia collapsed onto a cot, pulling Leo tight against her chest. The boy was shaking, his eyes wide and unblinking. "It's okay, Leo," Sophia whispered, her voice trembling. "Uncle Enzo kept us safe." Luciano didn't look at them. He couldn't. If he looked at their fear, he would lose his edge. He dropped Marcus into a metal chair in the center of the room and zip-tied his hands and feet to the frame. Then he turned to the monitors. "My God," Sarah whispered, standing beside him. On the screens, the house was being swarmed. Heavily armed men in black tactical gear were tearing through the rooms. They were smashing furniture, ripping paintings off the walls, overturning the piano. They weren't just looking for Luciano, they were destroying his legacy. "Volkov's hit squad," Luciano said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Led by Dmitry Petrov. I see him on camera 4, the one with the scar." "Petrov?" Sarah stiffened. "He's wanted by Interpol for the massacre in Berlin. He's a butcher." "He's a mechanic," Luciano corrected. He fixes problems, and right now, I'm the problem." A groan came from the chair. Marcus was waking up. Luciano turned. He walked over to the medical station, grabbed a smelling salt packet, cracked it, and shoved it under Marcus's nose. Marcus jolted awake, coughing, his eyes watering. He looked around the steel room, saw the monitors, saw Sarah holding an AR-15, and finally saw Luciano standing over him, like the angel of death. "Welcome back to the land of the living, Marcus," Luciano said softly. "Though I can't promise you'll stay long." Marcus spat blood onto the floor. "You think this tin can will save you? Petrov has thermal lances. They'll cut through that door in an hour." "Then we have an hour," Luciano said. He pulled a chair over and sat directly in front of Marcus. "Why the Russians, Marcus? We had a code. We kept the foreign syndicates out of Chicago. That was the rule." "Rules?" Marcus laughed, a wheezing, wet sound. "The world is changing, Enzo. The Russians offered me the shipping lanes. They offered me full autonomy. All I had to do was give them you." "And Sophia?" Luciano asked, his voice dropping to a whisper. "And the boy?" Marcus hesitated. He looked at Sophia, then looked away. "Collateral. Petrov said, no witnesses." Luciano stood up. He walked away, running a hand through his hair. Sarah watched him closely. She expected him to explode, to beat Marcus to death right there. But Luciano Moretti was a strategist, not a thug. "You didn't just sell me out," Luciano said, turning back. "You sold the city out. If Volkov takes over my territory, they'll flood the streets with the cheap fentanyl I banned. They'll start running girls through the port. You opened the gates to hell, Marcus." "I did what I had to do to survive," Marcus yelled. "You were going soft. You were going to retire." "I was," Luciano admitted. The room went silent. Sophia looked up, shocked. "I was going to step down next year," Luciano said, looking at his wife. "I was going to hand the keys to you, Marcus. I bought a vineyard in Tuscany. I was going to leave it all behind." Marcus's face went pale. The defiance drained out of him, replaced by a horror that was far deeper than the fear of death. You're lying." "The paperwork is in the safe upstairs," Luciano said. "Or it was, before your Russian friends probably burned it. You betrayed me for a crown I was about to give you for free." Marcus slumped in the chair, defeated by the weight of his own stupidity. Suddenly, a loud, grinding screech echoed through the bunker. Sarah looked at the door. Sparks were flying from the hinges. The metal was beginning to glow cherry red. "He wasn't lying about the thermal lance," Sarah said, checking her weapon. "They're cutting the bolts. We have maybe 20 minutes." Luciano looked at the monitors. The hallway outside the bunker door was filled with smoke and men. "We can't hold the room," Luciano said. "Once they breach, they'll toss in flashbangs and gas. We'll be fish in a barrel." "Is there another way out?" Sarah asked. "Please tell me you have a bat cave exit." Luciano walked to the back wall, behind the weapons rack. He pushed a section of the wall, and it clicked open, revealing a dark, damp tunnel hewn from the bedrock. "The Prohibition tunnels," Luciano said. "My grandfather used them to run whiskey during the 20s. They lead out to the drainage outflow on Lake Michigan, about a mile south." "A mile?" Sophia asked, her voice filled with panic. "In the dark? With Leo?" "It's the only chance," Luciano said. He went to the weapon rack and handed Sophia a flashlight and a heavy revolver. "I know you hate guns, Sophie, but if anyone other than me or Sarah comes near you, you pull the trigger. Do you understand?" Sophia took the gun. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were fierce. "I understand." Luciano turned to Sarah. "You take point. You have the tactical training. I'll take the rear and carry Marcus." "Carry him," Sarah asked incredulously. "Leave him. He's dead weight." "No," Luciano said, hoisting the chair, with Marcus still tied to it, up slightly before cutting the ties on the legs so Marcus could walk but remained bound at the wrists. "He's my leverage, and my witness. If we get out of this, I need him to confess to the Commission that this was a coup, not a war. Otherwise, my men will be hunted down." "You're thinking about politics at a time like this?" Sarah shook her head. "You really are a Mafia don." "Move," Luciano ordered. They stepped into the darkness of the tunnel just as the bunker door behind them began to buckle under the heat of the lance. The library-hidden door clicked shut, sealing them in darkness just as the first wave of gunfire splintered the wood paneling above. Luciano didn't hesitate. He shoved Marcus, still bound to the chair, toward the narrow staircase that spiraled down into the earth. "Move," Luciano commanded. "Sophia, keep Leo close. Don't stop for anything." They descended into the prohibition tunnels, a damp, suffocating labyrinth hewn from the bedrock by Luciano's grandfather during the 1920s. The air smelled of rot and ancient secrets. Above them, the muffled vibration of the thermal lance cutting through the bunker door echoed like a distant drill. They had 20 minutes before the Russians breached the lower level and realized the birds had flown. "My ankle!" Marcus whined, hopping awkwardly as Luciano dragged him by the collar. "It's broken." "Keep walking, or I'll break the other one," Luciano growled, shoving the traitor forward. "You're my ticket out of this, Marcus. You're going to tell the Commission exactly how you sold us out." They trudged through the gloom, the only light coming from the tactical beams on their weapons. Sarah took point, her movement precise and lethal. Luciano brought up the rear, his shotgun trained on the darkness behind them. After what felt like an eternity, Sarah raised a fist. "Halt." "Fresh air," she whispered, signaling back to them. "We're at the Lake Michigan outflow, but I see shadows." Luciano moved up. Through the rusted grate, he could see the moonlit beach. A black SUV was parked on the sand, engine idling. 4 men stood guard, smoking cigarettes, their assault rifles slung lazily over their shoulders. Petrov had anticipated the escape route. "It's a fatal funnel," Sarah hissed. "If we open this grate, they'll cut us down." "We have to rush them," Luciano said, checking his shotgun shells. "On my mark. You take the left, I take the right. Sophia, hit the sand and cover Leo." Luciano kicked the grate. It flew off its rusted hinges with a screech that tore through the night. They burst onto the sand like demons rising from the underworld. Crack, crack. Sarah's aim was surgical. The 2 mercenaries on the left dropped before they could even raise their weapons. Luciano racked his shotgun, tsk-tsk, and fired. The blast caught the 3rd man in the leg, sending him spinning into the surf. The 4th mercenary, a giant of a man, dove behind the engine block of the SUV and opened fire with an AK-47. Bullets chewed up the sand around them, pinning them against the concrete pier. "I can't get a shot," Sarah yelled, diving behind a piece of driftwood. Suddenly, Marcus saw his chance. He had managed to slip his bound hands in front of him during the chaos. Seeing the Russian SUV, he didn't run for cover. He ran toward the enemy. "Don't shoot! It's me! Marcus!" he screamed, sprinting across the open sand. "I'm with Petrov. Get me out of here." The Russian mercenary behind the SUV paused, confused. He lowered his rifle slightly. "Valerius?" "Yes. Drive! Just drive!" Marcus yelled, reaching the driver's side door. He yanked it open, shoving the confused mercenary aside, and jumped into the driver's seat. "Luciano, he's getting away!" Sarah shouted, raising her rifle. "Let him go," Luciano said, lowering his shotgun. He watched with a cold, grim satisfaction. Marcus slammed the car into gear. He was laughing, a manic, desperate sound. He had won. He had survived. But he had forgotten one thing. The mercenary Luciano had shot in the leg earlier, the one lying in the surf, wasn't dead. Delirious with pain and seeing the SUV abandoning him, the wounded Russian raised his pistol. "Niet!" the Russian screamed. "No leave!" He fired 3 shots through the driver's side window. The glass shattered. The SUV swerved wildly, the horn blaring as Marcus's body slumped onto the steering wheel. The vehicle rolled slowly into the lake, the headlights cutting through the murky water, before flickering out. Karma had come for Marcus Valerius, delivered by the very allies he had sold his soul to. Silence returned to the beach, broken only by the distant wail of sirens. The police were coming. Luciano turned to Sara. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by the cold reality of their situation. He was a Mafia don. She was an FBI agent, and the danger was over. Sara raised her rifle, pointing it directly at Luciano's chest. Her hands were shaking, but her aim was true. "Luciano Moretti," she said, her voice cracking with conflict. "Drop the weapon. Put your hands on your head." Sophia gasped, clutching Leo. "Sara, no, he saved us." "I have a job to do, Sophia," Sara said, tears welling in her eyes. "I can't just let him walk away. There are bodies everywhere." Luciano didn't fight. He dropped the shotgun in the sand, but he didn't raise his hands. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, waterproof flash drive. "You have a choice, Agent Walker," Luciano said calmly. "You can arrest me. I'll be out on bail in 24 hours, and the war for Chicago continues." He tossed the drive to her. She caught it with one hand, keeping the rifle trained on him. "Or," Luciano continued, "you can take that. That drive contains the names of every judge, senator, and police captain on the syndicate payroll. It brings down the whole system. It's the career maker you've been building for 6 months." Sara looked at the drive. "And in exchange?" "I'm dead," Luciano said, pulling Sophia close. "Luciano Moretti died on this beach tonight. The man who leaves here is just a ghost. I'm retiring, Sara. For good." The sirens were close now. Tires screeched on the asphalt road above the beach. Sara looked at the drive, the key to cleaning up the city she loved. She looked at Leo, burying his face in Luciano's leg. She looked at the dead traitor in the sinking SUV. She lowered the rifle. "Go," she whispered. "Thank you," Sophia sobbed. "Go before I change my mind," Sara yelled, turning her back on them to face the oncoming police cruisers. Luciano nodded once. He scooped up Leo, took his wife's hand, and they ran into the shadows of the dunes, disappearing into the night, just as the first spotlight swept across the sand. The king was dead. Long live the man. Wow, what a ride. I did not see that twist coming with the Maid being an FBI agent, and Marcus getting exactly what he deserved. Talk about instant karma. It really makes you think, doesn't it? Sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones holding the knife, and the strangers we ignore are the ones who save our lives. Luciano was a criminal, sure, but he had a code. Marcus had nothing but greed, and it cost him everything. If you enjoyed this story, please do me a huge favor. Hit that like button right now. It really helps the channel grow so I can keep bringing you these crazy stories. And if you want more twists, drama, and karma like this, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a video. What would you have done if you were Sara? Would you have let Luciano go, or would you have arrested him? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.